Welcome to Work Smarter, Not Harder, the podcast where we explore strategies shaping the workplaces of today and tomorrow. I'm Sabron, your host for this episode.
Hi everyone, I'm Preetham. Together, today we bring you an actionable insights to help you and your organization thrive. Today's topic would be the powerful intersection of people strategy and diversity, and how combining these elements can create an inclusive workplaces where everyone has the opportunity to succeed in their careers.
We are thrilled to have with us Jatin Lalwani, a seasoned manager in program management who specializes in people strategy at Walmart. He's based in Bangalore. Jatin is known for his innovative approaches and his dedication to building impactful workplace culture. Jatin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sabron Preetham. It's great to be here.
Okay. Okay, Jatin, very nice to have you here. Like before we deep dive into this conversation, like we would like to ask you for a formal permission. Shall we record this for our future records and for the so like can we put this on the platforms like YouTube and Spotify so that this would be a great insights and would be a worldwide reach? Will this be all right with you?
Absolutely, you can do that. Sounds good to me.
Great. Now, before we get started, we'd love for you to introduce yourself in your own unique way. How would you describe your professional journey and passion for this field?
Yeah, I'd start off by, just talking a bit about myself, what were my ambitions through college and how it has sort of evolved. I've always wanted to be in the space of HR, uh, particularly taking a liking for it through, honestly, my teachers being such great advocates for it and understanding the importance of the role, right? I started off in the operations space. Honestly, at that point in time, I felt like my ambitions were always aligned with doing a more strategic role. But I took that as a great learning opportunity to just understand different aspects and patiently waited for my opportunity to transition, learn into a more strategic space. Then did a bit of talent architecture or design related role, and now I'm more of a strategic consulting role for my team, and particularly within Walmart for our global tech and corporate functions teams. Uh, into understanding how we can shape our organizations better. And this conversation that we are having sort of uh, is a great platform for me to sort of understand your perspectives and what's happening in the industry, but also sharing my ideas and thoughts around diversity, equity, inclusion. You know, I've always taken the approach of learning as much as possible. I think that's where you start off, right? Even in the concept of diversity, equity, inclusion, many people just sort of think of it as it's the trend, let's do it. But at the fundamental of it, you need to understand why is it important, what value does it bring. And I honestly have seen a lot of evolution in this field. uh, what it started off as was more of a people are doing it, let's check the box. But when you see it being done effectively, there's a lot of merit to it, and I'm happy to sort of get into that conversation with you guys. But thanks for having me again.
Wow, that's such a refreshing way to put it all together. So I can already tell this is going in a very directed way and insightful conversation. So let's jump right in.
Absolutely, let's do that.
Okay, getting into the role of diversity in people strategy. So, Jatin, so let's start with the basics, Jatin. So, in your experience, what role does diversity play in shaping a company's people strategy, like being in Walmart? So, we would like to have your insights on this.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Preetham. And I can give my personal opinion, but also what I've learned from seeing the industry, what I've learned at Walmart, where the trends are, particularly in tech, for example. I think when we think of the role of diversity and inclusion, it's important to understand why is it important, right? A lot of people just do it for the sake of it, as I was mentioning, a check the box initiative of sorts. But at the fundamental of it, when we think about our talent pool, first and foremost, your the preliminary effort that you're trying to address is that everyone has a fair and equitable opportunity, whatever phase that is in. That could be at the hiring stage, that could be, let's say, when we are deciding a promotion, or that could be a lateral move, or just in the way that we interact with each other, right? Just making them feel more. We call it belonging in Walmart. So is the person that if a particular person from a certain group is not feeling that they belong, then there's a concern there. Now, why is it a concern? When we think about an organization the size of Walmart, or even a smaller organization, you have talent that are there in multiple teams. Now think of two teams, right? One team that has great equitable practices. Hiring is done by a certain standard. When there are choices between two individuals, the factor that's considered is not a religion or let's say ethnicity or gender even. And then you think about a different team within the same company. Now, when you have teams that have these different practices, think of the bigger picture when you have to transfer talent from one team to another. If the other team does not have fair and equitable practices, and there might be someone exceptionally brilliant in one team, they might not consider that. And fundamentally, we've seen that this affects performance of a company as a whole. So from a company's perspective, when you don't have fungible talent, what fungible talent means is that you can have a workforce that can easily move into different spaces. For that, you need the best people. And to get the best people, you need to have a broader set. So it starts from hiring. You when you're looking at the market, it starts there. When you have certain preconceived approaches as to, okay, I'm not going to hire, or sometimes it's not even conscious, right? And most of the time it's not malicious, in the sense that people are having a stand against a certain group, but sometimes it's more subconscious. And that's where bias becomes extremely critical. And so when you start off by understanding the biases that might exist, and you look at a particular talent pool with open eyes, when you're looking at the external market and thinking of people to promote within your org or move within your org, you're just broadening your group from whom you can select. And so then you have 100 people that you're considering for a role versus maybe 25 people that you're excluding, and there might be a gem within those 25 people, but for some reason of bias, you've excluded them from your consideration. So from a role perspective of strategy within an organization, I think talent pool is one of the biggest visible sort of benefit of maintaining these practices. So most companies ask why, right? And it's very simple. It comes down to talent and the performance that comes, and the performance directly impacts the bottom line. So the numbers suggest that, and in companies that sort of just do it as a check the box initiative, it's also seen that that's not as effective in sort of driving the fundamental purpose. So it's not just about doing it for the sake of it, but really inheriting the benefits of it by doing it the right way.
That's a very interesting insight. So I think while you were going through this, you mentioned about one key point. For example, one person who is very much settled in a team and is maybe has a promotion or a lateral movement to another team. How does, what strategies can you implement, in order to get the actual, like the same environment throughout the team?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, what we do is to ensure that we are not abiding by a particular metric or a goal, right? So a lot of times you see an approach where we are going to achieve 50% of this group, or 20% of this group in our overall. And so sometimes you're forcing yourself to fit that bucket of having 50% here, 50% there. No, that's not the intention. It's not the intention of having equal representation of everyone. It is about having the right person chosen without those demographic factors being a key point of consideration when you make these decisions. So while it is important to measure how we are doing it, that should not be the only, that should not be a goal. It can give us insights, but you shouldn't target for 50% of, let's say this is a very prominent debate, right? Where gender is sort of the biggest point of discussion in this aspect. So it's always, people say that there needs to be 50% of each gender. But honestly, when we think about tech, that's not the case at all. That could be as a result of many demographic factors that are not within the control of the company. So for instance, tech as an industry is predominantly male dominated. At least from when we look at our competitors as well. But the solution isn't necessarily to bring it to 50% because then you might be uh, giving up on practices of what you should be doing as a purpose of diversity and inclusion. The purpose is those factors don't influence your decision. The factors that influence your decision on a promotion or a hire or a lateral move should just be skills and talent, right? So at sometimes it's okay if it's not 50%, but you mentioned what strategies we need to employ. It starts with looking at all your practices in an employee's life cycle. So think about hire, think about associate relations, think about progression, how we shape our teams, right? You think about all these different units or sort of broad, what we call center of excellences, right, within HR. So your recruitment, your hiring, your promotion, your total rewards. You think about all these areas and you identify uh, perspectives that might be bringing in bias into the systems. So it starts with a great process as the sort of the foundation, and the goal should be that these processes are robust and considerate for potential flaws, right? You expect that flaws are going to happen. Humans are not perfect. As an HR, I might build a policy, but managers or recruiters might still bring in that bias. So it's always about reflecting on all the processes that we do, all the decisions that we make from a diversity equity lens, and then you measure, but not necessarily to see if you've met a certain target, but to bring in insights. So I think that's where the difference lies in how you think about diversity, equity, inclusion. If you're just purely sticking to the numbers and just going by a particular percentage that you need to meet, then it's not really effective. You're just doing it for the sake of it. It starts with the sort of the numbers is just telling you, but you have to read between the lines and try to understand what's happening at your organization.
Yeah, that's a wonderful insight, Jatin. Basically, it's not just about hiring diverse talent, but it's also about in creating an environment where everyone feels they belong and they can contribute, right? You mean to say about this with your experiences, right?
Correct. I think necessarily with belonging, what we have seen is that it largely impacts retention, right? People stay in organization where they feel that they belong, right? And belonging can be in different ways, and different things that people do can impact belonging. So often in this space, we think about extremes, but even the slightest sort of approach that we take in certain situations, certain things that might yourself as a manager not, think about it that way, but it could be impacting someone in a negative or a positive way. Um, so if I were to give you an example, often, the way we recognize people. So within a particular team, we might have made a huge recognition or in front of a town hall. For someone who's maybe at a manager level, but then couple of levels down, you might have maybe an analyst who's done equally hard work, brought in as much contribution, but they weren't recognized in the same way. They were recognized, but maybe they were just given a simple thank you over email. So just those little things where over here you're seeing that you're not being inclusive of people at a particular level, right? It just does not have to be gender or ethnicity. Belongings can be for different kinds of groups. So it's just important to be aware that in all practices that we do, we are consistent, and that's what brings the belonging and makes people feel like they would want to stay, right? And it's a great
Yeah.
place to work. And when you have a great place to work, you get the performance out of people, and it not directly, but you can see that places that don't have fair equitable practices, often you hear about stories of people leaving in large numbers, and performance dropping, and then in turn it affects the bottom line. So it's important that we make that connection of, it's not just about, we are just doing it for the sake of it. It is in fact influential to a company's performance. And at the first and foremost of it, we talk about respect as one of the core values at Walmart, right? So that's where it starts.
Yeah, I mean that's a very great example. I mean that I like how you're connecting the dots, and I
Yeah.
think the viewers, I mean, those who are viewing this podcast are really going to enjoy it. So, yeah, I think all the points that you said is definitely, I mean, is going to have a very big impact in a very nice way. So, okay, now let's switch things up for a quick game. Okay, Jatin, we'll describe you a scenario. Please tell us if it's a diversity win or a diversity dilemma and why. Are you ready, Jatin?
Absolutely, let's go.
Okay. So the first scenario is a company launches a scholarship program for underrepresented groups in STEM.
Okay, that's an interesting question. On the surface of it, if I have to give a quick answer, but I'd prefer to give the long answer, but if I have to give a quick answer, I would say it's a diversity win. But the long answer would be, we need to be cautious of a couple of things, right? When we think about, and I was mentioning the example in tech necessarily, when we think about the ratio of the male gender being more prominent, you could think about this in a similar way, although we are speaking about a different group. Necessarily what you want to do is encourage a particular group who has not had the opportunity through multiple reasons, financial reasons, that they haven't been able to take up a particular area of interest, right? There might be a lot of people who could potentially be extremely successful if they had the resources and opportunities. So this is a great win when we think about from a broader macro perspective, uh, that potentially if in the future you could have a large portion of groups that are currently not having the not having the benefits that we currently do, and bring them to an equitable position where they get the chance to compete for a role at maybe at a particular college, or at a Harvard or a Stanford, whatever that is, right? Where without those scholarships, they might not have the chance. But it's essential that we address a few things when we think about uh, such programs. So generally, when we think about scholarships for underprivileged groups, even there can be potential biases. You think about sometimes, again, if it's thought about a check the box initiative again, and going back to the point that I was mentioning again, if it's just about giving the scholarship for public eyes, and then regardless of how the students do as part of the scholarship, right, whether they are not showing the promise or the talent of someone else, but you still go ahead and do it anyway, just for the public perception of, okay, our college is doing something in the space of equity and inclusion. So while a very important and noble effort done by the institute, it's important that we do it the right way. And so you're rewarding hard work and sort of, as the podcast name says, smart work. We are rewarding smart work and not just doing it for the sake of it. And so the intention has to be right. But in general, these programs are generally helpful from a macro perspective of bringing groups of different kind to an equitable position, so that all groups can then at a later point, and these effects are generally not seen in a year. So often, uh, we get asked to show results of our diversity practices, but most often these efforts are recognized, years later, where we see a substantial benefit in a particular group many years later. So it's certainly an investment if done the right way.
Yeah, okay. That's a very interesting perspective. Okay, moving to the second scenario. I think this is one of a very common problem which all of us might see. In a team meeting, only a dominant voices are heard, even if it's a diverse team.
Yeah, that is a concern more than a dilemma, I would say. Uh, so it can be a concern for multiple reasons. I would say diversity is an angle to it, but there could be other concerns as well. The concern could be, do you have engaged employees in your organization? So it could be a talent issue, but on the other hand, it could be a bigger issue where people don't feel that it's a safe space to speak, right? So there could have been certain instances uh, where a particular person might be a little held back to express their thoughts, and that's a concern from a belonging perspective. Maybe they are disengaged, maybe they don't feel like they feel repercussions happening. So again, I would say it's, to cut my answer short, I would say it's a concern, a dilemma more than a win, and it's important to be prompt about it. Ideally, you would want to have mechanisms that help you identify these situations more effectively. So through your engagement surveys, through anonymous check-ins, obviously you want people from different teams checking in into associates from other teams. So you all want a lot of listening sessions happening to understand what the root cause of the issue is. But it's certainly a dilemma that could be as a result of a potential belonging issue or a diversity issue where certain group does not feel represented enough that they feel safe to speak up.
Yeah, I hope the viewers are enjoying the conversation. I think Jatin is throwing beautiful insights. And I think personally, I'm enjoying it. But yeah, okay. So the last scenario would be an organization celebrates cultural festivals with employee-led events.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think employee-led is the key word. Obviously you're including a particular group to sort of design and approach it the way that they would like to do. So it's certainly a win, again, if done right. It gives the employees, again, we need to ensure that everyone has a fair and equitable opportunity to, again, design it the way, because even within employee led you could have a certain group that's a little bit more dominating in terms of numbers, and they would want it to be done in the right, in that particular way. So with supervised sort of view on it, and an outlook on it, it is certainly a win to have employees have a say in how they would like to celebrate, and certainly a fun one, but important to make sure that everyone's represented even during times of celebration.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, how all this simple action can have a very big impact on workplace culture. So yeah, so thank you, Jatin. So now let's move on to the next part.
Okay, Jatin, now let's go deep dive into the future of diversity in people strategies. So looking ahead, like what trends are you seeing in the diversity and people strategy space?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Um, I would like to, just sort of take it a step back and just start talking about, in terms of before I move into trends, which is obviously the sort of the buzz of the town. We'd like to hear about what's happening with Gen AI and what's happening with all the technologies that we have and what role it plays. I think it's important to note that even within diversity, equity, inclusion, there are some fundamental things that we still don't get right. And it is obviously a challenge. And you would think that in an era of such advanced technologies and things like so much learning that we have had over the years, um, we'd be able to nail down the foundations. But honestly, I would say that we haven't seen that a lot in the industry. First and foremost, I would say measuring from a organization perspective, particularly, which is obviously an area of interest for me, to be able to measure the effectiveness of your diversity programs or your initiatives. It is a very difficult challenge to be able to answer a simple question of here's what you did for diversity. How has that impacted uh, the company positively or negatively? And there's just so many layers to it, right? There's no one simple answer. And so I think with technology, we are able to see, and to your question, we've obviously Gen AI is at the center of what we are doing, but what we need to do is stick to what the fundamental uh, issues are in terms of what we do right and what we don't right, and continue doing what we are doing right now, which will stay for some time. But the trend of what I would presume would change is the role that technology plays in making it simple to sort of measure how effectively we are doing. So when just to sort of explain it through an example of where I'm coming from, when we look at a particular change in our policy that is supposedly directed towards an attempt to fix something from a diversity perspective. Maybe we saw a low score of belonging in a particular year, and we made certain strategic decisions. How do we see that change now? Today, as of today, is just purely looking at numbers. I see a lot of firms just purely looking at numbers and not beyond it, right? Sometimes it is the scores from a associate survey, but it could be multiple things, right? Beyond that, there might be I think one something that my leader says that it's more than just looking at the averages, because a lot can be hidden in the averages, especially the outliers. Right? Sometimes you might be thinking from a broad perspective, but there might be a particular team that has it really bad, right? It's not always consistent. And so what Gen AI will help us is to be able to derive these insights and look at data from a more unbiased standpoint. And obviously, that's something that has been a concern in the AI industry of how do we remove bias from AI's perspective, right? But it certainly, if right AI tools are built with the right data set that it's trained with, it can certainly remove flaws from our human perspective. I think, as I mentioned before, the fundamental issues of lack of diversity inclusion comes from human bias more so than anything else. And so that might very well translate into the way I look at data as well. There might be something that's, screaming at me and saying there's a problem there, but I might be conveniently ignoring it because I'm maybe trained or brought up in a certain way, or I've built my thought process around things a certain way. So I might be conveniently ignoring something that is right there in the data set. But AI can look at it in a more broad manner and tell us things that is not seen at the surface level, right? So I think that would be the biggest change that I would like to see. And also, when we are thinking about building technology, a big part of diversity inclusion should be, I see a lot of hires or sort of shortlisting of CVs done through AI tools, right? So how are we building those tools? Do we have the right representation? What's the sort of data set that's going into building these things? All play a role, and because these tools are going to be used, when ChatGPT came, and then now you have Gemini, two of the and both of them use some of the biggest AI data sets, and even companies like ours leverage some of those data sets. So they're going to be there for some time, right? And it's going to be pretty hard to overthrow them. So it's important that they're built the right way. And so it places a lot of onus on these companies, especially leaders in AI, to build these tools effectively, and that's going to impact a lot of decisions that we make, right? And so you would see many decisions made by AI versus a human. So from a person standpoint, as a working professional, the role that I have to play as I think about the future is understanding where the shortcomings of AI is. Obviously you want to make your time usage more effective, so you cannot sort of be ignorant of it and say it's not good, because obviously we are seeing tangible benefits of saving and being more productive, not wasting time, you know crunching numbers and things like that. That's where AI can help you, but it's important to sort of bring the human element of it and think from that lens. And so that would pretty much impact everyone from that angle, not just from a diversity equity perspective, but in general, but more so in from a diversity equity inclusion perspective. That would be one of the trends. I think other trends, right, would be, it would be uh, interesting to see how different industries evolve as we move into an age of technology predominantly. Obviously we are seeing certain groups not represented as well. So I think it would be interesting to look beyond just from a company's perspective and look at it more from a macro perspective, and how companies are investing into the community, right? A lot of things that Walmart does right, for instance, is giving back to the community and also investing in the community, right? Because those are the people who will in turn then be maybe a potential vice president at your company, from the community that you are serving. So it is important to see how companies are investing into the community, and that might not immediately pay off in the short run, but it is important that we companies invest in having resources and skills. Particularly skills is something that is top of mind for us here in Walmart, because that's where you know uh, based on the skills that you're able to acquire, that's where uh, your future job opportunities and future success. You want the best talent, that's what's going to determine your company. It's as simple as that. The people with the best talent are going to lead this sort of digital age. And honestly, companies with who invest in the community and sort of impart the skills that they need, that they believe is going to be important for the future, they need to engage in the community and sort of provide the resources for them to be able to gain skills. So think about one of the questions that you asked, right? Scholarship programs. So similar efforts to bring certain tech skills, right? Software engineering, for instance, that's and how it's evolving from an AI perspective, bringing those skills to a community that don't necessarily have those opportunities. And so then you're building those skills, and in the future, who knows that you're creating a positive brand in your community as a company. And if a few gems sort of come out of those from a talent perspective, they might prefer your company because you're invested in them. So that would again bring an equitable place where when you see a talent pool, you don't see people just from one particular community. You're investing in the long term and you're sort of creating more value across the job market and also being a great employer. So I think those are key trends to look forward to. Obviously, there are many, many other things that I might not be as closely uh, in tune with, because we've seen that the change has been rapid in this industry, right? And honestly, it's not it's not unfair to say that most people, and including myself, don't know a lot about it yet, and we are just scratching the surface of learning about it. So there's a lot to learn, and that's the view I hope most people sort of take with them, just approaching and having an open mind. It starts with there. It starts with having an open mind, learning, and then integrating practices that you see, trends that you see across the industry, and learning from each other. I think that's going to stay, and it's more prominent now than ever.
So thank you for the valuable insight, Jatin. So I think when I was listening to your the future trends, I mean, so this is a very student-driven podcast. So I think most of us who are listening might enter the job market in the coming, coming few months. So as one of the I mean, you have been like a student 4 years back, you know how COVID has lot of economic impact, and plus the AI is also coming into a picture. So every student has this concern about opportunities, right? So I mean, as you know, one of the people strategist for one of the world's largest private employer, Walmart. So what would you recommend? I mean, this might be a question which is little out of our topic of diversity and inclusion, but I think since it's a student driven podcast, I think if you can throw some light on that topic, where how we can leverage and how we can be more competitive in this current very tough job market.
Yeah, I think there's lessons to be learned here, both for from a student perspective, but also for honestly educational institution. It becomes extremely critical, sort of extending from my previous point, where you are building great networking and industrial ties. To have honestly, sometimes when I was, and I can speak from my experience when I was back um, in college doing my um, bachelor's degree in administration and business administration and specializing in HR. A lot of the things that I learned were great, but a lot of the things that I could have learned uh, as is certainly prominent, right? And sometimes the focus is more on, I would say that the focus is more on hard skills and learning certain aspects of the job, and essentially expecting someone to be fully ready um, as they join the role. But often when you join the role, you realize that you never had to be ready with all the skills. What employers are necessarily looking for is someone who has the aptitude to learn, right? And they are looking at more softer skills, things like critical thinking and judgment and uh, aptitude to learn, right? If you're doing something today as an employer, you want me to pivot into something completely new, am I flexible to do that? Those are the sort of softer skills and sort of behavioral traits that becomes important and comes through practice, and as you do that practice, you build confidence. So, as an educational institute, the role is to tailor your program into more softer skills, especially as we're thinking of AI. A lot of the generally considered hard skills will be automated to a large extent, and the human sort of touch comes more on the softer side of things, right? How you design the architecture, how it's impacting associate experience. Those are the thoughts that needs to come to you, as opposed to just learning how to write a formula in Excel, right? Those things can be learned even on your job. So I think educational institute as well as you yourself as a student need to sort of adapt the way you learn. And there's this saying that most industry experts are saying, right? Which is you need to work with AI and not fight against it. And so honestly, the one who sort of gets their work done in the most efficient way possible is able to identify where they can add value, uh, but at the same time able to integrate AI to reduce the amount of time they spend on things. So it just allows you to do more things. And I think being adaptable to change, those are the things that you need to focus on, and your activities that you do during the course of your of your how many years of college will help you build those experiences and honestly make you more comfortable in understanding and keeping up with the trends, and makes you a little bit more confident in attending an interview and possibly landing a role that might be very interesting to you and looking for. I think honestly, employers are not looking for people who are tailor made, ready and fit. They are just looking long term. Will this particular person add value and be able to grow in the company? And to grow, you need to be adaptable. You need to be able to pivot, uh, be great with change. And so it all starts with the soft skills, the mindset, and that comes through practice, right? That would be one. And obviously networking and skills are important. I'm not understating the importance of those skills, but the focus shouldn't be necessarily on that, which has unfortunately been the case in many institutes, from the institute perspective as well as students. But from a student perspective, that's where you can take a little bit of charge of your own career and develop those softer skills that might be very, very critical.
Jatin, do you think AI for diversity and inclusion is a boom or a bane?
Historically speaking, you know, it it could go in either ways, honestly. I think when we think about technology and the role it has played, we've seen a lot of benefits to it, and there's also a lot of dark sides to it. I don't think whenever we've seen change in technology, we have necessarily been able to limit the negative consequences of it. And here it's very, very prominent that the usage of it will continue to grow. And so honestly, it comes down to a lot of these AI industrialists who are leading experts, and essentially having an ethics committee around the development of AI. And if I would say that in general it might be a bane, because I'm generally optimistic about things, but it is not a matter to consider lightly. Uh, More so now than ever, because this technology might be more disruptive, change the ways we work more than any other technology. So I'm optimistic, but pragmatic as well, and careful in sort of my thought process. And I would certainly be an advocate for the fair and ethical usage as well as development of AI, which we are certainly seeing here and being promoted here in Walmart. So that is one thing that I really like about what we're seeing here, and I'd like to honestly see that a lot um, across the industry. It's a collective effort. Um, Someone can do it wrong, and then you sort of build a practice around that in the industry. So it's important that we understand where things can go wrong, be conscious about it, and use it in a way that is fair and equitable. Uh, it's important to understand the foundations of things, what we are trying to achieve, and make sure that spirit sort of lives on by the usage of AI and not just do it for the sake of it. I think I've said that multiple times, but it's important to not have it
Mhm.
just for the sake of it, right?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a very interesting question, I mean, which I thought just now. I mean, so I think the future of, I mean, during COVID, when the COVID wave was done, everybody was like, work from home is the new future way of working. But what I've heard from a lot of people who are working in corporate now, company is, more in emphasizing on people to come to office and work from office. So did diversity and inclusion play a very important fact, I mean, in people's strategy for, driving this decision? Because on the surface level, it looks like, okay, when you're in office, you meet people from diverse background, right? So, what's your take on this?
I would say diversity plays a significant role in it. When we think about diversity, we are also thinking about our remote population, right? That's a particular group that is maybe in the future of working, that's going to be a smaller group, and how we work with a remote population. So it's important to do it right. It's not as simple as saying let's return to office and change it back to the way it was. People have changed their lifestyles post COVID. People have adapted their work life. Maybe a thing that I hear a lot is that they used to have, you know especially people with younger kids, they used to have a caretaker, but they don't need that anymore. And it's extremely difficult to go for them to go back, because obviously it's a financial hit for them to hire someone and then go back to an older lifestyle. So it's important to understand what are the things that we are taking away. Firstly, you start off by understanding how has an individual's lifestyle changed from before COVID versus after COVID, right? What are the benefits that they have sort of seeing with the newer approach to life? Because at the end of the day, you want people to be happy in your company, and happy people perform. It's as simple as that, right? So you don't want to rush and sort of just assume that things can just get back to normal. For most people, it might be, but for a lot of people, uh, it might not be as simple as that. So it's important to consider diversity inclusion there, right? Considering for all your groups, understanding the hardships that they might feel, making an exception, especially for people with disabilities, right? You think of a place like Bangalore versus let's say in the US. Bangalore, you might have not, you might be aware because you were in Bangalore earlier, it is notoriously known for its traffic. So a lot of people are losing a lot of time traveling through the traffic to just reach their office. And for think about people with disabilities, it might be even harder. People with certain medical conditions who might be going through difficulties. So, are we integrating those processes into making remote exceptions? Do we ensure that our promotion program remains equitable for a remote group versus people who come to the office? It's a lot. And diversity, to your question, diversity, equity, inclusion certainly plays a role. While you don't sort of think about it in as that being the predominant reason, it's certainly important to have those considerations. It's easy to overlook because data says that obviously people working together in a particular office and working on a project is in general a little more productive than having to work with someone who's in different spaces. It adds value to the company, but it can also be negative if not done the right way, right? Your intentions are to boost productivity, But you need to have the diversity, equity, inclusion angle, the belonging angle, to make sure that you're not implementing a policy change post return to office. And this might be very relevant for many companies who are thinking about how do we sort of build our ways of working, as we call it, right? In tech, for example, the ways of working might be very different to HR, right? The necessity of working together in an office might be very different for one team versus another. So, are we conscious about different people, different teams, where they come from, what are the benefits that we are taking away from them while making these decisions? Um, Versus what are the benefits we are getting in return. And so in effect you want to get a net positive effect of what the decisions you're making. And diversity and inclusion and belonging plays a huge part in making sure that works.
Thank you, Jatin. I think
That's
that was a
a
very interesting.
beautiful, interesting conversation.
Yeah. Okay, I think we spoke a lot about diversity and inclusion. So uh, thank you, Jatin, for sharing your wonderful insights. I think for viewers who are wondering, okay, this is a very informal setting. I think on a personal note, I have known Jatin for like 5 years. I think we started a career together at Walmart, and to see someone in a short span of time to grow to being a manager at one of, like I said, Walmart, which is one of the largest private employer, that shows his skills. So I hope everybody enjoyed the podcast. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you, Jatin, for accepting the invitation on a very short notice. I know I've not given you a lot of time. I just threw you some ultimatum. I'm like, oh, you have to be there for this podcast, and you agreed to it, and you're here, and you spoke very well. I mean, it was very organic, and it was a really good conversation. So thank you so much. Yeah. Any final comments, Jatin, before we end the podcast?
No, it's been a pleasure. It's certainly a great topic to speak around, something that I think of as being close to my heart, especially coming from people strategy perspective. It's obviously tailored into every decision I make, thought process I make, and it's a learning for me as well. So it's a pleasure being here, Sabron, Preetham. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you to all our listeners for joining us on Work Smarter, Not Harder. Remember, diversity and inclusion aren't just check boxes, they are the foundation for creating workplaces where everyone can thrive. Until next time, stay inclusive and keep building better workplaces. Thank you, Jatin, for being here and for your wonderful insights. It was a very good conversation with you. Thank you very much.